Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to the attic. It's time for another voicemail. Today's voicemail is from Teresa in Minnesota. Let's listen to what Teresa has to say.
Hi, Lloyd. This is Teresa. I'm in Minnesota. You can use this if you want to. Thank you for your work. I wanted to ask you a question today. My parents, who did not talk to me for about 15 years because I am still disfellowshipped, and eventually because they were inactive, they started to talk to me slowly but surely again. Um, they are slowly but surely getting sucked back in to the religion. They ran into a sister that they knew, I think, in a grocery store or something. And of course, I can see the progress. Now my mother is going to meetings again. She's constantly trying to tell me stuff about it. I use little things that I've learned from you over the years, such as, do you realize in 1919 their platform was millions now living will never die, that kind of stuff. But my question is, and I don't get into discussions with her or arguments. I just kind of change the subject and I make it clear that I don't really like to talk about it. I'm happy for her on one level that she, you know, will have hope and have friends again and all that kind of thing. But she says that they're completely different in terms of their viewpoints and their stance on how you treat disfellowship people, and that they have become evolved to the point where they're so much better now, her words, in so many ways. And I just didn't know if, I know you've done some videos on this, but just a quick answer on, um, is there any truth to that, or is there anything I could say to her that would kind of shut that down so she realizes, no, they're really just saying what you want to hear to get you to be more and more involved. um, I appreciate it. Thanks. Bye bye.
Well, thank you for leaving that voicemail. And you've asked for a quick answer. The quick answer is no, they're not better now. No, things are not so much better. Unfortunately, your parents are misled. Your parents are being deceived by an organization that is seemingly sucking them back in after they've been inactive for a number of years. And I guess in their minds, it kind of makes sense from their perspective that they would be thinking, well, we're going back. We need our daughter to go back too, because we all want to be together in the paradise. We don't want our daughter to be destroyed at Armageddon. So even though you've set these very clear boundaries about not wanting to get embroiled in debates and awkward conversations about religion, it's only natural that they're going to keep trying to recruit you because they love you and they don't want you to die at Armageddon. So it's a difficult one. What would I say in your situation? Well, first of all, I think you're right in saying, hey, why don't we not talk about religion? Why don't we talk about anything else other than religion? There are so many things we can talk about. You know that there's a fundamental difference in our opinion on this. Why make things difficult? But if I were in your shoes, having exhausted that approach, I think I would say this if I were you, and I'm not you, and don't think that you need to say this. This is just how I would kind of handle things. I would say, you understand that I don't believe anymore in the Jehovah's Witness religion, don't you? And they would presumably say yes. And I would say, would you want me to return to the Jehovah's Witnesses just to make you happy, even though I don't believe it in my heart? And just see what they say. And that will tell you kind of how honest they are. Hopefully, they will say, no, if you come back, we'd want you to believe it. We'd want you to honestly believe that it's the truth. And I'd say, I'm really pleased to hear that. Because here's the thing, I'm not going to believe anything unless I'm convinced. So in order to convince me that this is the truth, that you've strayed from over many years and now you've suddenly realized again is the truth, what I'm going to need is some actual evidence, rather than you simply making vague statements that things are so much better now. I'm going to need you to show me how things are better now. Because I know for a fact that when it comes to disfellowshipping or removal from the congregation, as it's now called, make sure you use the correct terminology, by the way, because that will help them to understand that you do know what you're talking about. When it comes to removal from the congregation, very little has actually changed. Because it's still impossible for someone to disassociate from the congregation on conscientious grounds because they no longer believe and maintain their relationships with those inside. That's still impossible. The only way in which things have changed is that if you are removed or disfellowshipped for something other than apostasy, then you can look forward to being invited to the meetings. No extended conversation beyond that, no meaningful interaction, just invitations to the meeting. And when you turn up at the Kingdom Hall, you can expect to be greeted with, again, no meaningful conversation from people at the Kingdom Hall. That's how things have changed. And you can say, I know this, I've done my research, I do keep up to date with what's going on in Jehovah's Witnesses. If I've mischaracterized anything, please correct me. But if you're going to correct me, rather than making vague statements about things being so much better now, show me in the literature and let's talk about it. In fact, come over, bring your Bible, bring whatever literature you want, bring your JW Library app. And if you really want to convince me that this is the truth, let's sit down at the table and thrash it out. But honestly, I would prefer if we don't have you bringing things up, even though I've asked you repeatedly not to, because I know that this will always be a fundamental difference. And to be quite honest, I think that your reasons for being in the religion have more to do with your emotional attachment rather than it actually being true. I would... Maybe I'm too much of a straight talker, but that's how the conversation would go if it were me. That's not necessarily how it should go, how I'm telling you you should handle things. Maybe it's better in some situations to be more diplomatic and to be more vague and, let's say, accommodating. But ultimately, it all boils down to, is this true or is it not true? And also, if you're saying things are so much better now, how do we account for the long period of time, the many decades when things weren't better, when things were in fact worse? What do we say about that? What do we say about the decades where things were, by your words, worse than they are now? And yet it was supposed to be God's one true organization. How do we account for that? Why did it take so long? Why has it taken the faithful and discreet slave from 1919, when they were appointed, apparently, all the way until 2024 to make this amazing change that makes things somehow better when in fact it doesn't? But How do you account for all of those decades when things were not as good as they apparently are now? If this is God's one true organization, can you explain to me how New Light is supposed to work if God is a God of truth? Why would God allow his organization to mislead people or to do things the wrong way or to have harmful or cruel or abusive practices for decades if he is a God of truth? What's the scriptural precedent for God allowing his servants to operate for decades and decades with false information and false rules and false standards and false policies? What's the biblical precedent for that? Show me. Again, I don't expect you to say all of this, but that's where my mind would be. And again, I think you're playing things exactly how they should be played if you're just saying, look, it's probably best that we don't talk about this. But if they keep insisting on a conversation, which I can kind of understand them wanting to insist on a conversation because, again, they love you and they're misled by a cult, try to stop them from deviating from this central issue of, is it true or is it not true? And do you really want me to join an organization just to make you happy rather than because I genuinely believe it to be true? Because if you want me to believe it, I'm going to need some evidence and I'm going to need some persuading. None of these vague things are so much better now. So I hope my answer has been helpful to you in some way. Don't forget that you can leave a message if you wish by going to speakpipe.com/Cedars, remembering to indicate clearly if you don't want me to broadcast your message on this channel. But that's all I have time for. Thank you so much for watching.